just one of those weekends where MLS just become a goal-scoring fest week. And this week was no different. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and actually, made a mistake there, but 6 and 7 games this week at least feature a team that scored 3 or more goals. I mean, this is why sometimes I just love MLS and how it is kind of becoming one of the most entertaining league in the world. I mean, I know that people say that when you look at all these goal score happen, usually that means your league's defense is really bad. But at the same time, you know, if you are a team that are one of those good teams, or you're just kind of like a neutral soccer fan in general, you love to see goals. You rather see goals than just kind of like a boring 0-0 draw that happened between FC Dallas versus Columbus, which, of course, I'll get to this one. It actually wasn't as boring as you thought it would be. But, yeah, either way, let's get into these games, and we start off with the most obvious result of this week. Colorado, of course, losing 3-0 to Atlanta. And because Colorado lost this week and Seattle won 2-1 against the Whitecaps, it means that the Rapids joined the Quakes in the elimination club and that they are officially eliminated from playoff contention. And I already did a video about that, so if you're a Rapids fan, make sure you check out that video. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think of it? Because it's really the first team that I actually done in the Moving Forward series that does not involve with the Quakes, and I just worry that maybe I get some of the facts wrong. And I already have heard people say that I got some of the facts wrong about some of the players that are actually not championship level player, and some of the players actually came from League One side like Plymouth and also Ipswich. I mean, okay, yeah, they're not really English kind of championship level, but they're League One kind of talent, kind of similar, I guess. I don't know, but going back to this one, yeah, Atlanta, it was pretty obvious they were going to win. They were 3-0 up at halftime. Could have had more in this game. You know, Mickey with the brace, Tito Villalba with another goal, and you know, I think the only thing that is missing in this game for Atlanta is that Joseph Martinez once again failed to score. And I think this is now the second game in a row that Joseph Martinez have not registered a goal. And, you know, I guess maybe that is pretty much his peak point, and that it looks like once he got 28 goals, he just kind of lied down and said, yep, I got 28 goals. I don't really need to get some more. But at the same time, I think this is kind of good news for Atlanta, because for a long period of time, I think between July and September, it's only Joseph Martinez that scored goals for this team. I mean, he had an incredible 2-month spell where he was scoring goals every single game, and he wasn't just scoring 1 goal, he was scoring 2 goals. He had a couple of hat tricks in that stretch, and yeah, it's good the fact that other players on this team can contribute, and it's good to see Miguel Almiron obviously started getting the goals. I mean, many people kind of forgot about how Miguel Almiron is just as talented as Joseph Martinez, and he's proving it once again, which is why I am definitely not looking forward to when the Quakes play Atlanta in this midweek game. I have a feeling we are probably going to get absolutely destroyed, and probably Miggy is going to get at least a goal or 2 in that game. But moving on in the next match, the first surprise of this weekend, or I'm not quite sure should I say it is a surprise, because Montreal really needed to win this game. And early on, it didn't look like they were going to win the game. I mean, when I checked this game out early on and how Austin Trusty scored his first goal in MLS and Philly were up 1-0, I thought that the Impact were in a little bit of a deep trouble. But instead, they score 4 unanswered goals. It all started with Silva scoring a goal in the 28th, Taidir scoring the 39th. Silva, of course, made the 4th goal, and probably the most painful and most suffering kind of goal score in this game, the 3rd goal scorer in this game. Yup, Quincy Amarikwa. He scored a goal in this game, and as a Quakes fan, that is absolutely devastating. I mean, you know, on one hand, I'm happy that he finally broke his goal-scoring duck, but at the same time, you know, I was hoping he was going to break the goal-scoring duck with us. And it just kind of now makes this trade between Amarikwa and Dominic Aduro more one-sided. I mean, Aduro, he's been barely playing for the Quakes, and he's been kind of like just coming off the bench. Well, Amarikwa actually started in this game for Montreal, and from what I'm seeing, Amarikwa in these first couple of games with Montreal, he looked like much better than he was with the Quakes, and it's just another example of how whenever a player leaves the San Jose Earthquakes, they always tend to be better. I mean, the Quakes are literally now like the factory of sadness in MLS. But, you know, going back to Montreal, I thought this was probably the best performance they have played throughout the season. I think it's kind of on point to the Red Bulls game that they had at home, but I think this one might be better because, one, they were on the road, and two, they were playing against a Union team that was in a pretty good streak lately and looked like they were secured themselves in the playoffs. And speaking of which, I just actually look at the remaining schedule for Philly today, and I gotta say, I need to kind of regret saying that Philly is an automatic lock to be in the playoffs a couple of weeks ago, and which is why I gotta keep looking at each team's schedule coming down the stretch, because it turns out the Union has an absolute murderous row going down the stretch. I mean, they have to play against Sporting KC down the stretch. I think they play against Atlanta also, and they have to play against NYCFC, and they play against the Red Bulls. Actually, they don't play against Atlanta, but they have to play both New York team, and they have they have to play those teams, and that is definitely no easy task. And with the Union now only 5 points of the playoff line, you know, it's still no guarantee that they could potentially make the playoffs. And it looked like if things go terribly wrong down the stretch with this really tough schedule that they have, we might have a reminiscent of what happened in 2016. Only this time, the Union did not make the playoffs. And in 2016, they had that massive collapse, and they almost fell out of the playoffs. And it looks like it's going to be the same thing. Although, you know, yeah, maybe they can bounce back. Although the next team they play is against Seattle, and we know Seattle is just red hot right now, and they have to go all the way across the other side of the country to play that game against Seattle, and it's a midweek game. So, yeah, the odds are obviously stacked for the Union in that game, and most likely they are probably going to lose that one. And if they lose that one, then it gets really interesting in terms of that fifth spot. All of a sudden, you would think that was only the sixth spot that is open now in the Eastern Conference, with the fact that the Union were doing very well. Oh no, it isn't. It's now 2 more spots up for grabs in the Eastern Conference because of how, you know, I wouldn't say the Unions are struggling, but the Union might be facing a stretch where they could really struggle down the stretch. But meanwhile, moving on into the next match, and moving on to a crazy match. This is probably the craziest match out of all the high-scoring games that we have. Well, maybe besides this one, but this one was crazy because there was a lot of headlines, and it's going to take me a while to talk about all the headlines. So basically, TFC were up 3-0 in this game. Victor Vasquez in the 5th minute, Josie Altidore in the 16th, and Sebastian Javinko score in the 36th. So it looks like Greg Benny did not decide to rest his guys for that Campeones Cup game that's going to happen on Wednesday, and decide to go with a strong squad. But yeah, all of the 3 most important attacking piece for Toronto score in the first half, and you would think that at that point, yeah, that's game, set, and match. The Galaxy ain't going to come back from this, and this is just classic Galaxy again, leaking goals left and right and left and right. But then all of a sudden, Zlatan strikes. And Zlatan, who coming into this game were just one goal away from scoring 500, and he will be joining Ronaldo and Messi as the only player in the world right now with 500 career goals. And that 500 career goal that he scored is probably the most Zlataniest way you could imagine of him scoring a goal. I mean, holy crap. If you did not watch this goal, go check out on YouTube right now, or just go on MLSsoccer.com. They already post this goal on their official website. But my oh my, this was just incredible. Basically, the ball was delivered in the box. It was an over the top ball. I believe it was Dos Santos that delivered that ball. And usually when that happened, usually when there was an over the top ball delivered in the box, you would see somebody just kind of try to flick it or just try to head it into the back of the net. Oh no, that's not what Zlatan did. Instead, he did his kind of classic taekwondo kind of roundhouse move, where he basically acted like if the ball was actually an opponent head, and he just pretty much just roundhouse kicked that ball into the back of the net. I mean, that is something I have never seen before. It's not just MLS kind of goal that I've never seen before. I don't think anybody in the world has ever seen a goal scored by a player that just made a taekwondo kind of roundhouse kicks move to the ball and hit it into the back of the net. And it was just so impressive that TFC fan, all of them just pretty much applaud. And if that actually happens in the Cali Clasico, I would also applaud too. I mean, that is just insane. And of all those goals that Zlatan has scored throughout his career, that has to be right up there as probably the craziest goals I have ever seen Zlatan score. No one has ever done that before. And it seemed like that really kind of filled up the Galaxy team and really kind of bring the energy to the Galaxy team, because when they came out of the second half, they scored the second goal in the 54th minute by Ola Kamara, and then Fletcher basically turned the game on its head to make it 3-3. And all of a sudden, it looked like the Galaxy was going to maybe try to do something that they did with their last win against Orlando City, which is they've been down in most of the game, but somehow, in some way, they will always just outscore the opponent. Unfortunately, that was not what had happened. Instead, Jonathan Osorio retook the lead for TFC, and then Jay Chapman added a goal in the 94th minute to seal the 3 points for TFC. And yeah, for the Galaxy, despite of how amazing that Zlatan goal is, and certainly that was a talking point, nobody is going to always forget about this scoreline and how the Galaxy are just done. They are pretty much done. They're unofficially eliminated from the playoffs, but they're pretty much officially eliminated in the playoff in terms of mental way, because the way that this Galaxy defense, I mean, I've been saying every single week about this defense of how bad it is, and right now it just continues to be even worse. I mean, this is the second game in a row the Galaxy has conceded 5 or more goals, and this is the third game in 4 matches they have conceded 5 goals or more. I mean, that is just absolutely insane. And I even guarantee you that even a USL defense can be defend better than what the Galaxy defense is. I mean, it is just an absolute shambles that the Galaxy are in right now. And, I mean, in some way, remember how I said in the preview and how I warned the Galaxy fan that, Dominic Kintner, he's kind of like a negative kind of style of coach with some kind of negative football. Yeah, it turns out that negative football didn't really quite work, and it just pretty much seemed like nothing really changed for the Galaxy with Dominic Kintner being the interim manager for them, and it's just pretty much the same stuff that they saw under Ziggy Schmidt. And unfortunately, Dom is probably not going to be the interim manager for very long if this is how the Galaxy will be going forward. I mean, in some way, if the Galaxy are just even more insane than the Quakes front office right now. They would keep Kintner until next season, and that would be a very interesting Cali Clasico. I mean, that would be one that I would really want to beat the Galaxy in that Cali Clasico. But as for TFC, you know, their season, you know, I don't think this really helped them either way, because in many ways they still have a long mountain to climb, and especially with Montreal winning, you know, TFC didn't really make up any ground on any of the teams that they are trying to catch up. I mean, they probably make up ground against Philly, but they're just way behind Philly right now. There's just no way they're going to catch the Union. And with the fact that when you look at TFC, they really need to now win every single game for the rest of the season, and maybe pray that DC might drop some points and Montreal might drop some points, and that is the way to get to the playoffs. So with that being said, that still probably is very unlikely, which is why I was kind of surprised Greg Vanney decided to put Victor Vasquez, Altidore, and also Javinko in this game, considering the fact that they do have this midweek games against Tigres in the Campeones Cup, and it's a chance for them to potentially win some silverware this year. But moving on into the next match, so this was the match that I talked about earlier of how it was kind of a boring game, and, you know, it was in some way kind of a boring game, but certainly both teams had chances. I think FC Dallas has a couple of good chances in the first half. Columbus had a couple big chances in the second half. Also, I think right around the middle part of or midway point of the second half, Higuain had a chance to basically head it in from a kind of a free header position, but unfortunately that ball just kind of sailed over him. And yeah, I mean, it was a 0-0 draw, and in some way it doesn't really kind of affect both teams. I think the only thing it affects in this game is that FC Dallas is no longer first, because Sporting KC won that game against the Quakes, which means that Sporting KC are now at the top of the Western Conference. And this is kind of also another game that kind of explains why maybe FC Dallas is not going to go very far into the playoffs. And it might be said for the same for the Columbus Crew. But moving on into the next one, another surprising result. Houston, a 4-1 beatdown against the Timbers. So the Dynamos haven't won a game since July. Well, they have won games in the U.S. Open Cup, but in the league, they haven't won a game in July. And yet, somehow, in some way, against a Timber sides that has won their last 3 games, and they just absolutely destroyed them. And how about Albert Elise in this game? And I really think, after what we saw from Albert Elise in this game, you know, you could say that he is potentially back to his good form. I mean, Elise so far this season has been amazing. You know, he's been not only scoring a ton of goals, with 11 now, after he scored the first goal and the equalizer for Houston in the 32nd minute, but he also has a ton of assists too. And if this is the Albert Elise we saw against Portland, and if this is the Albert Elise we saw earlier in the season, and that is in just top form and one of the best winger in the world, then, or not in the world, but in MLS, then yeah, Houston, all of a sudden, I said that this team was kind of like in deep trouble heading to that U.S. Open Cup game. All of a sudden, maybe Houston are not going to be in trouble in that game. And, you know, for the Dynamo, this was a game that, you know, even though they won this game, it doesn't really kind of help them in terms of making the playoffs, since they're just so far from actually making the playoffs. But it really helps in terms of getting their confidence back and just getting ready for probably the biggest game of their season, and really the only thing left for them to fight for the rest of the season, which is the U.S. Open Cup final. And, you know, like I said, Elise was on fire in this game with a goal and 2 assists. Both of those assists were scored by Mauro Manotas, who is another guy that is been just kind of in some way being very underrated, and that I feel like people don't appreciate how good Mauro Manotas is, and that he scored 14 goals this season. I mean, that is a lot of goals that he has scored for a striker. And, you know, again, this also goes back to what I said about Houston, of how this is not really a bad team. But the only reason why they look really bad right now is because they've been just blowing leads left and right. And, of course, I will talk about it once they get eliminated. And the moving forward series will be covering Houston. But this is not really a bad squad. The only thing that is a big problem is just the leads that they have blown. And if they didn't blow those leads and they don't being just a very soft kind of team in the last 10 minutes, this team could have easily made the playoffs. But, you know, unfortunately that is not going to be the case anymore because, you know, they had a bad stretch between July and September. And as for Portland, yeah, you better hope that this is just a one-off game. Because for Portland, you know, they are in 6th place right now. And I think they're 4 points above Vancouver. Now, as I will get to Vancouver in a second, and how they have a gauntlet of a schedule coming in the last 6 games, you know, sitting in that 6th spot is definitely not as comfortable as you would think Portland should be. And you hope the Timbers can regroup in their next game, which comes in 3 days, and I think they are playing, I think they're playing Columbus, I believe. So they're going to have to regroup in this game and try to potentially get a win and bounce back. And I think right now for Portland, my biggest concern with this team is that this team just tends to struggle on the road. And I know it didn't show during that historic 15-game unbeaten streak, but it just felt like throughout the season, you look at the times when Portland are on the road, they just don't look like the same teams that they are at home, which is kind of understandable because Providence Park is just an absolute fortress for Portland. And Portland's, I think they have yet to lose at Providence Park this year. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. They are going to be fortress at home because most likely when playoff time comes, and if they would be in that 6th or 5th spot, they will have to play on the road, and that is where the Timbers struggle this season. But moving on into the next match, and another surprising game. RSL drawing 1-1 to Minnesota, and this was a bit of a controversial game right at the end because after Ibarra got the equalizer for Minnesota, Quintero actually scored the 2nd goal, and it looked like Minnesota completely shocked RSL and turned the game on its head with that 2-1 lead. But they look at VAR and they said that Quintero was actually offside. And I know that Loons fans will not be happy with the fact that that was called offside. But if you look on the replay and you look closely, it does look like Quintero was just offside. I mean, the camera angle, or not the camera angle, but the camera of that shot where Quintero was offside was very blurry, but you can clearly tell that his left leg just stepped in front of the last RSL defender, and in that case, that of course is going to be offside. And you know, I don't think Minnesota will be that disappointed that they didn't get a win in this game because the Loons, like Houston, are pretty much out of the playoff contention. And for RSL, yeah, what the heck was this performance? I mean, you are a team that just scored 6 goals in back-to-back games, and I said coming into this game against Minnesota, against one of the weakest defense in the league, I thought for sure that RSL was gonna just light it up again. And it definitely looked like it with Damar Kreilach scoring a goal in the 11th minute. But they just, for whatever reason, cannot put away those chances like they've been doing in the last 2 games. And this is what happens when you don't put away your chances and you let the opponent kind of stay in the game. Minnesota just somehow sucker punched RSL in the 84th minute. And you could also say that RSL is very thankful that they were able to get a 1-1 draw, and that VAR that was later later overturned that goal was overturned. Because if this was a loss for RSL, this would have been a big loss for RSL. I mean, this would give Vancouver now new hope that they can actually make it to the playoffs. And yeah, I mean, in some way, I think the only good thing about RSL is that Vancouver lost this week. And speaking of Vancouver, let's talk about this game. And I know a lot of Whitecaps fans says that they should have won this game. And even Carl Robinson said that they should have won this game. And I have to agree with him. They should have won this game, and they should have deserved to win this one because they had so many chances in this game. And it's not just good chances, but golden opportunity chances. I mean, the amount of just finishing in this game from Vancouver was so bad that, you know, it's kind of also makes me in some way kind of question the fact that, do they actually deserve a win? I mean, I know I said that they probably definitely deserve the win because they really worked hard and really were pushing Seattle apart for majority part of the game. But when you don't put your chances away, it does not matter whatsoever of those chances that you create. And for Seattle, obviously, Ruidíaz continued to be in a very good form by scoring the brace, and that, of course, is all they need. Kamara, of course, scored a goal before halftime. It looked like that was going to lift Vancouver's spirits back up, but they didn't because they just couldn't finish if their life depends on them. And for Vancouver, like I said, you know, this is a bad loss for them because, you know, they dropped points to RSL in the playoff race, and they, you know, fortunately they didn't drop points to Portland, but they also dropped points to Seattle. And for Seattle, after this win, it's pretty clear that I can pretty much just stamp on Seattle and say that they are going to be in the playoffs. Like, there is no way the Sounders are going to be missing the playoffs now. And just with the way that they have now won 9 in a row, I have a feeling it could be 10 in a row when they play against the Union coming this week. And as for Vancouver, yeah, this is not a good start in terms of your just absolute gauntlet of a schedule that you had in the last 6 games of this season. And all I can say for Vancouver and alongside with Philly is good luck trying to not just collapse right at the end and suffer a heartbreak at the end of the season by just nearly missing the playoffs. Speaking of playoffs, New England. So the Rams drew against LAFC, and this was another game that was kind of similar to the FC Dallas versus Columbus game where it wasn't really pretty whatsoever. I mean, the first half was really boring. Second half, you know, LAFC kind of started to dominate, and another former Quakes player scored a goal. What is it with Quakes players this week scoring goals? Finally. I mean, Amarikov broke his duck, and now Orania broke his duck. And I think the only thing I will say about Orania is that at least the Quakes did not have to wait so long for Orania to finally score a goal. And this goal scored by Marco Orania, it wasn't even a pretty goal whatsoever. And in some way, I could say it was kind of lucky that he scored this goal, because when he strikes that one, I thought Matt Turner was going to save it. Like, I thought for sure Matt Turner was going to easily saved it because the ball was hit right to him, but unfortunately one of the refs defender deflected and it basically hits it into the back of the net. And you know, at that point you would think that maybe LAFC is going to get that second goal and pretty much just cruise to another victory, but no, instead New England, they got a goal from Brendan Bye, and yes, that is actually his name, and he scored his first goal in MLS. And yeah, New England, all of a sudden, this team is started to crawl back into the playoff race. I mean, this team looked like they were dead and buried a couple of weeks ago with this really miserable stretch. But ever since they got that win against NYCFC and now got a big result against LAFC on the road. And keep in mind, the refs were really pushing hard to try to get that second goal right near the end. Well, actually get the equalizer and potentially maybe get a second goal late on, and they really tested Tyler Miller. I mean, Tyler Miller made some incredible saves in this game, and you could maybe also argue the refs probably should have got all 3 points in this game, but still, this is a very impressive point, And the Revs, they are only 5 points behind Montreal and only 1 point behind DC, who plays the same amount of game that DC has played, which means that they have a game in hand over Montreal. And they are playing against Montreal one more time. And this is going to be at the last game of the season. So we could probably see a scenario where there could not be just one team that is fighting for the last spot in the Eastern Conference. There could be 2 teams fighting for 2 spots, and those 2 spots are the 2 teams that is above the red line. Because I know DC, you know, not like I said, but DC, spoiler alert, they kind of drew against the Red Bulls, which, you know, it wasn't a very good draw, but they still have to play against Montreal one more time, and that game is at home for them in 2 weeks. So, you know, things can get really interesting down the stretch, and, you know, if New England can continue to have a good stretch down the road, which when I look at their schedule, it's still pretty tough. I mean, they still have to play RSL, Atlanta, TFC on the road. You know, it's still a kind of a dodgy kind of record, kind of games that they have left for this season. But they do get to play Chicago next at home, and that's one that I think they should win. So, yeah, I think the Revs could be very kind of quietly sneaking it back into the playoff race. And, you know, you got to credit the Revs and credit what Brad Friedel has done for this team, and how everybody, including myself, said that they were dead and buried. There was no chance they're getting back into the playoffs. And now all of a sudden, with 2 big resort on the road, they're now back, potentially back in the playoff picture. But yeah, moving on into the next match, and yeah, I don't need to talk a lot about this match because I kind of told you what happened in the match vlog. The only thing I will say about this match is that Gerso had an absolutely incredible game, and he absolutely just torched us in this game with 2 goals and I think also 1 assist. And also Tarbell is absolutely garbage because 2 of the goals was very savable, including just spilling one and just letting a shot from also Gerso just gets into the back of the net. But the good news for the Quakes is that Starhay is now gone. He is no longer the manager, alongside with D. Croc, who is the assistant manager for the Quakes, and Steve Ralston is now the manager for the Quakes. Well, interim manager, that is. And there's a good feeling that we might not get absolutely destroyed against Atlanta. No, I'm just kidding. We're probably still going to get destroyed by Atlanta. But at least the Quakes are actually doing something. And after just us endlessly crying for Starhay to get out of this club, it has finally paid off. And that finally the pressure that Fornelli has felt was just too much, and that he has to do something, and I'm glad that he finally done something. But yeah, moving on into the next match. So this was another crazy game. DC United had the lead 3 times in this game, and 3 times they blew it. And in many ways, besides that, they should have won this game, because despite the fact that Rooney did get a goal alongside with Paul Arriola and Lucho Acosta, Rooney could have had a hat-trick in this game. And speaking of hat-trick, BWP got a hat-trick in this game. And, you know, with Rooney, why he should have got a hat-trick? Because he missed at least 4 sitters in this game, or 4 golden opportunity in this game to potentially give DC United the lead. And DC were up 3-2 in the 87th minute, and you would have thought that was it. DC was going to get a big victory over the Red Bulls and continue to put pressure on Montreal, but nope. Instead, BWP come to the rescue, and like I said, this is definitely a really bad result for DC, considering the fact that now Montreal does control the destiny in terms of making the playoffs, and that even though they do have a game in hand over Montreal, they're 5 points back. But the good news is for DC is that they do play Montreal in 2 weeks, and that game is not just a 6-pointer for DC, it's a 15-pointer for them. And that is a game that they have to win. If they do not win that game, then they are probably done in terms of making the playoffs. And for the Red Bulls, I don't think this was a good result for them too, because a Atlanta won this week, and Atlanta now gets first place, and they also have a game in hand over the Red Bulls. So it looks like Atlanta is probably going to be the Supporters Shield kind of champion, which, you know, I'm pretty sure from what I heard from Red Bulls fans, they actually don't really care if they win the Supporters Shield. They just want to go to the playoffs and be successful in the playoffs. But, you know, in the last couple of games, the Red Bulls have started to show some sort of disjoint, and in this game, if it wasn't for BWP rescuing them, which we have seen before in the playoffs when BWP is not on his best form, this Red Bull team just kind of collapsed, and it kind of, if BWP wasn't in for in this game, they would have lost to DC in this one. But yeah, meanwhile, moving on into the final game of this week, not really going to talk a lot about this game because, one, I did not watch this game, and two, I didn't really watch the highlight of this game. But this was an example of who exactly is now the most garbage, or actually garbage is not even I don't think that is a word, but it kind of show who exactly is the worst team in the league. I mean, I know San Jose is still probably the worst team in the league right now, but you can make a good argument that Orlando City might be the worst team in the league too, because they just gave up 4 goals against a team that hasn't won in what seems an eternity, and a team that hasn't played in a game in what seems like an eternity. And usually when that happens, you would think Orlando City might have the upper hand, because Chicago, you know, they need to get back to fitness after having so many weeks off in MLS play, but they didn't. They just dropped 4 goals in this game, and yeah, I mean, Orlando, get ready for the moving forward series, because your name is gonna come very, very soon. I think Orlando is going to get eliminated probably, I think, the next game, because they're at 24 and Montreal is at 44. So yeah, I think maybe Orlando City is the next game is going to be the game that probably will eliminate Orlando City. So I'm gonna get ready to do the moving forward series for Orlando City. And for Chicago, you know, despite the fact that you did get a win in this game, it doesn't really mean that much. I mean, it was Orlando City, first of all, and second of all, you're not going to make the playoffs, and you will also be getting the moving forward series treatment in the next coming weeks, because they are also a team that is getting closer and closer to getting eliminated. But yeah, that is pretty much it for all the games that I have talked about. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these games? And yeah, I am of course going to end this video, but before I end this video, I just want to quickly say that I will be doing the preview for the midweek game right after this video, and I will do the power rankings tomorrow, and I will go to the Atlanta games between the Quakes. As much as, you know, it's a midweek game, usually I don't like going to midweek games, especially on a school day, and the fact that I know for sure the Quakes are going to get absolutely destroyed, at least one thing I'm going to be happy about before the game has even started is that Starhay is no longer the manager, and that changes look like it's going to happen very soon. So yeah, that of course is it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.